Over here, I go ahead and enter equal to DGET into brackets my database, which hasn't changed, F4 to lock. Then the field I'm looking at is this. Alright, comma. Then my criteria is over here. Come to another lesson on DGET function. Now the DGET function is also a lookup function, just like the VLOOKUP, the HLOOKUP, and the XLOOKUP that we know. But the DGET function is quite flexible in the sense that it helps us to extract a single value from a database or list based on a criteria that we set. Okay, and it's very useful because it also helps us to find the value we are looking for from a specific column in a database that matches our criteria. Now, when we talk of a database, as we go ahead, we'll get to know what a database is, because the database forms part of the syntax of the DGET function. All right. Now, the reason why it's also very important for us to look at DGET function as part of the functions we are looking at is that the DGET function is very useful in various fields, from finance to human resource management to inventory management and the likes. Now, this is an inventory data from a company, say Balfour Company Limited. All right, and if Balfour, let's say, takes supplies from a company and sells it, making it, let's say, a retail business, you can, so let's assume this is a transaction from such business. Now we have various transactions ID, from transaction ID TKR001 down to TKR 300. All right, so it's our 300 data points. Then we have the transaction ID, the products ID to the suppliers. All right, now what we want to do is that if we are to locate the suppliers for a specific transaction, or let's say the total amount for a specific transaction, or even the price for that transaction or the product that we bought, it's very difficult unless most of the times we use the Control F to get the find and replace. Then maybe we can type maybe TKR 0, maybe one transaction ID 69069 and hit enter. Then we can locate it over here. Then we can locate, let's say, the supplier, which is Sanchez, Anderson and Banks, on the date, and we can also find other transactions for that transaction ID. However, this becomes very stressful when we are dealing with large data sets, and it can even lead to errors. That's why the lookup functions is very important. So with the VLOOKUPs, the HLOOKUP, the XLOOKUPs, and now the DGET function. So we are going to take some examples to explain. All right. So first of all, let's say, pull out suppliers for specific transactions based on their transaction ID. All right, so over here we're using their transaction ID. So their transaction ID, then we use to search for the supplier. Now in this instance we are using the DGET function. Okay, so let me just bring some borders over here for them. All borders, I think it's okay. All right, so we are going to use the DGET function to pull out the supplier for a specific transaction ID. So let's say we want to look at TKR maybe 158. Okay, now with the DGET function, we go ahead and type our equal to sign, then DGET. So the DGET function, like you can see over here, it extracts from a database a single record that matches the condition we specify. All right, now the database, just like I mentioned earlier, the database is the range of cells over here that contains the data, right, including the column headers over here. All right, so now I'll bring my bracket to print my database. So this over here, that's our data. So I'll select my database and I hit F4 to lock it, comma. Now the criteria, sorry, the field I'm looking for is the supplier. So I'll select the field, then comma, then the criteria is the transaction ID. All right, I'll select that and hit F4 to lock. Then I can close my bracket and hit enter. All right, so immediately I hit enter, I'm getting the value. So if one thing you also have to keep in mind is the errors you get and how you can resolve such errors. So with the DGET function, if you get the value error, this over here, which is the error in value, it means that more than one record matches the criteria that we've set over here. All right, so to correct it, I can look at my transaction ID, and over here you can see that there is a mistake over here. Right, I omitted the dash, so you can just put your dash over here and hit enter. Immediately I correct it, you can see we now have Todd, Gaza, and Hayden as our supplier. All right, now just like the mistake I did over here, one thing you can do to minimize such errors is to also use data validation in addition to applying lookup function. So in that instance, let's apply data validation over here to get a drop down list for the transaction ID. So I'll go ahead and delete this, and I hit my Alt AVV. Sorry. So over here, my Alt AVV, I get my data validation dialog box. Then over here, I want to allow lists. Okay, so I'll select my list over here. Then the source will be the transaction IDs over here. So select the first one, hold Ctrl Shift arrow key down. Right. Then I have my source over here. Now I don't want to change anything else over here, because we've already gone through all these inputs over here. So I think most of us, or we already know. So I'll hit OK. Now if I come to my transaction ID over here, you can see I now have a drop down button over here where I can choose from this. Now there is this error that I also want us to take keen notes, and that's the number error. Right, now when you get the number error, it means that no record matches the criteria that we've set. So you can see over here that the criteria to the transaction ID, no record matches it. That's when we get this error. All right, and when we have more than one record that matches the criteria, you get a value in error. So over here, let's choose the transaction ID. So immediately I select, you can see the supplier changes. All right, so that's how we can also use the DGET function in this example. Now the next example that I want us to look at, in the next example, we are going to use the DGET function to, let's say, pull out a whole transaction based on the transaction ID. All right, so I'll go ahead and create more rows over here. Now over here, we want to get a transaction ID, so I'll go ahead and copy this, and I'll just paste the values. Okay, so let me just paste the values. Okay, let me just format this a little bit. Okay, so over here, what we want to do is that we want to pull out a specific transaction based on the transaction ID. And so over here, we just picked up one column. So what we are going to do is that, so let me create a border and make it stand out a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do over here is that I'm also going to create a data validation over here, but since I've already done it over here, I can just copy and I'll paste. All right, so I get my data validation over here. All right, so over here, I go ahead and enter equal to DGET into brackets my database, which hasn't changed, L4 to lock. Then the field I'm looking at is this. All right, comma. Then my criteria is over here. I go ahead and close my brackets and hit enter. Immediately I hit enter, I get for the product ID. Then I bring my cursor down here. When it turns to the plus sign, then I drag through to get the rest. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a mistake. Oh, sorry, I didn't lock it. Sorry. So over here, you make sure that the criteria, when you choose your criteria, you hit F4 to lock it. All right, then you hit enter. Then I get my value. Then I can go ahead and drag through. All right, then I get it for the other columns. You can see over here when I change the transaction ID, the whole details of under the columns also change. So that's how we can also use the DGET function in looking up values in a database, which is the range of cells contained in our data. So thank you very much for this lesson, and hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.